Little Plum by Rumer Godden, Chapter 6. Mind your own business. Nona would have minded hers at once, but, said Belinda, as if she were delighted. And next afternoon, Nona, haven't you another paper sunshade like the dollhouse one? She asked. Nona had found 2 sunshades and crackers at a party that Christmas. They matched the one that stood in the dollhouse, shoes-off place, and Nona had kept them carefully. Now, reluctantly, she took one out. It was pink with blossoms on it and gave it to Belinda. I was keeping it in case, she said, but Belinda was already writing. How do you spell umbrella? She asked. Gem also almost caught Belinda that afternoon. Belinda had hardly got back to the platform and turned to draw back the ladder when Gem and Matson came up the garden path. Belinda was almost hidden by the top branch, but not quite, and she froze as a rabbit does when it scents danger. Oh, don't look up. Don't, prayed Belinda, and held her breath until Gem and Matson had passed safely into the house. Then she had to hurry and untie the ladder from the fork, but she tried so hard to be quick that her hands fumbled, and she had only just time to draw it back when Gem came into the sitting room. As fast as she could, Belinda wriggled back to the platform and flattened herself against it. And what will Gem do when she sees the sunshade? Asked Belinda. She had put it on the windowsill with a message, "We take our dolls out." Why don't you? If you're afraid of rain, here's an umbrella. The sunshade was not an umbrella, but Miss Happiness and Miss Flower could use theirs in the rain because Nona had painted it on the outside with oil. Belinda had not long to wait. In what seemed a minute, the window opened wide and the sunshade was thrown out, thrown by Gem's hand, and hard. It was open, and like a little parachute, it caught the wind and floated, eddying toward the Fells' garden, and Belinda saw that it went so well because it was weighted by a screwed-up paper. A message, thought Belinda. It eddied over the Fells' garden, coming lower and lower. Belinda ached to go and catch it, but with Gem at the window, she had to stay where she was, and as still as that frozen rabbit. Suppose I sneeze, thought Belinda, and at once she wanted to sneeze. Luckily, Tom had taught her a trick of rubbing her finger hard under her nose, and she just managed not to sneeze. The sunshade came down, caught in a forsythia bush in the Fells' border, but still Gem stayed watching at the window, while Belinda grew colder and colder. She could not feel her feet at all. Her hands ached with cold, and her nose was running. But she's trying to trap me, thought Belinda. Nothing would have made her move. It was growing dark. Soon Mother would miss her. People would be sent to search. Tom, Anne, Nona, presently Father. Then Mother must find out what she was doing. Belinda knew without being told that Mother would be very annoyed. She began to think that she would have to move when the Tiffany Joneses' gate opened, and there was Gem's music master coming, as he did every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Belinda had forgotten it was Friday, and it must be 4:30, she thought. At the same moment, the lights in Gem's sitting room went on, and Matson stood there in the doorway, telling Gem to come down. Gem had her lessons on the grand piano in the drawing room. She only used the little white piano for practicing. Because the window was shut, Belinda could not catch words, but she could hear their voices, Matson's expostulating, Gem's curt, and see their gestures. "I won't come down," Gem seemed to be saying. "You must, Miss Gem," Matson was answering, and "I won't move," said Gem. Matson must have gone to get Miss Tiffany Jones, for that large lady appeared in the doorway. At the sound of her loud voice, Gem left the window quickly, and she doesn't want Miss Tiffany Jones to know, thought Belinda. At least Gem was not a sneak. Miss Tiffany Jones spoke to her so peremptorily that slowly, reluctantly, Gem went out of the door. Belinda had almost moved when Gem suddenly whipped back again, ran to the window, and took a hasty peep. "Ha! You thought you would catch me," said Belinda under her breath, and, cold as she was, shivering, thought Belinda, she made herself stay quite still until she heard Gem's scales going up and down and was sure that it was safe to come down. She was chilled to her bones, but it was just light enough in the garden to find the sunshade parachute. She had to take it indoors before she could read the message, which was written in small, clear writing. What it said was clear, too. "Trespassers will be prosecuted," Gem had written. "If I find you in our garden, I shall call the police." When they saw the pink sunshade thrown out of the window, Miss Happiness and Miss Flower were grieved. "But why?" they asked. "Why? We had hoped little Plum would go out in the world and perhaps come and visit us." Something was going on that they did not understand, but it was certainly exciting. What will little Miss Belinda think of next? They asked. Nona, can you make a Japanese dinner on a tray? Yes, but you will have to buy a dollhouse tea set, said Nona. Buy it with my own money? If you want a Japanese dinner, said Nona. Belinda had not told Nona how the jacket and socks had come back. The sunshade had been thrown out, nor told her of Jem's messages, but Nona seemed to have a shrewd idea of what was happening. If I lend Miss Happiness and Miss Flowers bowls and tea things, anything might happen to them, she said. You can't buy one of those painted metal tea sets. Tom would file the handles off the cups to make bowls. There was a pretty pink set in the window at Merrill's shop, and they only cost 9 pence. 9 pence? That's a heap of money, said Belinda. I can't spend 9 pence on Gem. Then you can't have a Japanese dinner. And why a teapot for dinner? Belinda was trying to argue, but Nona was firm. Japanese people seem to have tea with everything. Green tea. I can make that with paint water. Belinda hated to spend her pocket money, but Gem's last message had been really rude, and I'll show her who's trespassing, said Belinda. Nona had never made anything prettier than that tray. She made it from the lid of an old pill box and painted it shiny black outside, scarlet inside for lacquer. She gummed the pink bowls onto it in case Belinda spilled them, and gummed the food on as well, but dolls are used to having dollhouse food fixed on with gum. There were notices the size of half of your little fingernail to say what each bowl held. Rice, said one, that was snipped up white cotton. Fish. They were cardboard fish as small as ants, painted silver in a red sauce. Japanese people are very fond of fish, said Nona. Vegetable, ground up green parsley in another sauce. Cake, pink and white meringue sugar crumbs. There were chopsticks made from pine needles, and what was most wonderful of all, the tea was hot. Tom had filed the teapot handle off as well as the cup handles, and bored 2 tiny holes through which Nona threaded a loop of brown cotton and buttonhole stitched it so that it looked like a wicker handle, such as real Japanese teapots have. Belinda had taken the tea over in an old aspirin bottle, keeping it in her pocket so that it should not get cold. It was boiling when I put it in, she told Nona. Miss Happiness and Miss Flower hoped Gem, when she found the tray, would play with it. Pour out a bowl of tea, Miss Happiness and Miss Flower tried to tell her when they saw her at the window. Make little Plum use those chopsticks. But again, Miss Happiness and Miss Flower had not seen the message that had come with the tray. Why don't you give your poor starving doll some food? Gem read it, and the next moment, tray, food, bowls, saucers, teapot, chopsticks, everything had gone out the window. As soon as Gem was out of the way next day, gone for a walk in the park with Matson, Belinda went up in the ilex trees to see how Gem had liked the dinner. She soon saw, down below in the path was something scarlet, black, and pink, the thrown-down tray, its food all scattered, while on Gem's windowsill, close by the ledge, was a small china pot with a cover. By it was a notice printed, "Food for you." When Belinda had spied round to see both gardens were empty, she went across to get it. Whatever can it be, thought Belinda. When she was safely down again, she took the cover off the pot. Inside was something that looked like dreadfully smelling, dreadfully colored jam, covered by a piece of paper that said, "My own recipe." The recipe was written out in Gem's pretty handwriting. Vinegar, mustard, castor oil, toadstools, frog's eggs, crushed cockroach, worms. At the bottom was written, "Take it." "Good heavens gracious me," said Belinda, her eyes round. After the first minute, she thought it was funny, but when she showed it to Nona, Nona was not as sure. "I don't like it," said Nona. "We're not meant to like it," said Belinda. "You're teasing Gem," said Nona. "Don't go on." But Belinda said, "We're not teasing now, we're fighting." The war had now been on for 3 weeks, and "Little Plum needs a bed," said Belinda. "Nona, can you and Melly make her some quilts and pillows?" Japanese people do not often have bedsteads, only those who copy Western habits. Most sleep on the floor on thick quilts piled one on top of the other, with more quilts as covering and a hard pillow for their heads. They once used to have wooden pillows, said Nona, but all the same, Japanese quilt beds are comfortable. Miss Happiness and Miss Flower could have told you that. They each had sets of quilts, one all in blue, the other in pale pink. Peach Boy had a scarlet set, but he usually slept in the pocket of Belinda's dressing gown, which was flung down on the end of her bed, or on the floor. Nona chose some flowered stuff, palest blue, to match Little Plum's kimono, with a pattern of blossoms, and made 2 quilts for Little Plum to lie on, wadded with cotton wool, a pillow with tassels at the corners, and an overquilt, thinner, but wadded too. It was the prettiest set she had made. "I think Gem will like it," she said. "I believe if the window was open, I could put Little Plum into the quilts," said Belinda. "I believe I could reach. If I don't put her into them, I'm sure Gem won't. Poor Little Plum," said Belinda. It was certainly tiring for a little doll to have to sit all the time. Never to lie down, said Miss Flower. Never to be moved, said Miss Happiness. They were pleased that now little Plum could go to bed, but could she? You may wonder if Gem wanted Belinda, she was sure the trespasser was Belinda, to mind her own business, why she did not put little Plum out of reach or out of sight. Perhaps she likes the things we send, said Nona. Remember that Belinda had not told Nona how Gem had thrown the jacket and socks over the hedge, how she had cast out the sunshade and smashed the dinner tray, and I think Gem's pleased, said Nona, but Belinda shook her head. She just wants to catch me, said Belinda. Belinda had to take little Plum off Gem's windowsill to put her into the quilts. Where is she going? Cried Miss Happiness and Miss Flower as they saw a top knot and a flowery kimono in Belinda's hand up in the air. But in a moment, little Plum's legs were straightened, and she was slid between covers much warmer and more silken soft than anything she had ever known. A pillow was tucked under her head, and a minute later she was back on the windowsill, but lying down with the quilts all round her. Besides the bed was one of Belinda's notices. It's cruel to make children sit up all night. Our Japanese dolls have Japanese beds. Next day, a paper bag was hanging from Gem's windowsill. When Belinda went over and got it, she found there was no message inside. No message was needed. In the bag was the pretty quilts and pillows snipped to bits. Even Belinda was a little dismayed. She showed the bag to Nona, and Nona could have cried. But why? She asked, why? It took me hours to sew those quilts. And she said, touching the snippets, Belinda, what are you trying to do? Make Gem like little Plum or make her hate you? Make her like little Plum, of course, said Belinda. You would do it better without insulting messages, said Nona. Are they insulting? Asked Belinda with great satisfaction. You know they are. Well, she insults back. And Gem's a good fighter, said Belinda. Gem was. Next time Belinda went over the ladder on one of Gem's ballet lesson days, the window was open wider than usual. Before Nona had seen the quilt snipped up, she had made little Plum a cushion to match them, and Belinda had determined to sit little Plum on it. She had written a notice, Our dolls have cushions to sit on. She was in a hurry because she only got back from school a few minutes before Gem was due in, and she was perhaps not as careful as usual. As she reached up for little Plum, her hand knocked the window frame. There was a blinding, icy cold splash. Something hit Belinda on the head and nearly sent her spinning off the drain pipe. How she kept her foot on it and clung to the fire escape railing she did not know, because she was gasping for breath and spluttering. Then she saw that the window was streaming with water, while far below, where she might have fallen, was a small white plastic bucket, still rolling a little from its fall. It lay beside the cushion that had been knocked out of Belinda's hand, and she set a booby trap for me, said Belinda through her chattering teeth. It was a successful trap. How Gem had put the bucket up without Matson knowing, the children never knew, as the bucket was white and hidden a little in the rose creeper. Belinda, in her hurry, had not seen it against the White House wall, nor had she noticed that the window was open wider than usual and unfastened so that it swung at a touch. There had not been a great deal of water in the bucket. If there had been, Gem could not have lifted it to balance it on the open window, but there was enough to soak Belinda's head and shoulders. Water had run down her neck, so she was wet to the skin and so cold that she could hardly struggle back along the ladder, and her numbed hands found it hard to untie the ropes. She took a long time to turn around, come back for the ladder, draw it in, and climb down the ilex tree again. Fortunately, Gem was late, but by the time Belinda got back to the house, she was shivering from head to foot. The first person she ran into was Mother. Belinda, cried Mother. Belinda, where have you been? Into a bucket of water, said Belinda truthfully. But how? It fell on me, Belinda was just going to say, but Mother had seen how she was shivering and she wasted no more words. In a few minutes, Belinda was in a hot bath. Mother was rubbing her hair dry with warm towels and had called Nona to make a hot milk drink. She might have killed me, Belinda whispered to Nona when she was dressed again in dry clothes, and Nona had brought the milk into which she had put some honey. I might have been dead. Belinda sounded thrilled, but Nona was remembering the snipped-up quilts, and Belinda, give this up, she begged. What? Now? Said Belinda. Let her win now? Wait, said Belinda, and her eyes were bright blue over the top of the glass of milk. Wait and see what I'm going to do to her. When the buckets fell on Belinda, Miss Happiness and Miss Flower had been shocked, almost as shocked as Belinda herself. Japanese are a courteous people, and little misses to do that to one of another, they said. They were not only shocked, they were worried about little Plum, because some of the water had surely splashed on her. And little Plum has no mother to put her into a hot bath, said Miss Flower, to rub her hair dry. "No Miss Nona to make her a hot drink," said Miss Happiness. They knew that Gem would not think of a little doll's being cold, her plaster almost frozen on the windowsill. Miss Happiness and Miss Flower were beginning to understand that little Plum was in the middle of some sort of quarrel, and they did not know what to wish for. That Belinda would stop climbing the ilex tree, that Gem could learn to play, that we should all be peaceful and happy together, said Miss Happiness. The two little dolls were still talking it over late that afternoon when there came a sudden and determined shaking in the ilex tree. The end. Or end of the chapter.